looking forward to a great show. Mark Ader will join us, the Bozeman Schools Activities Director, and we're going to get his thoughts on how to start up 2 schools in the fall. Also, Keith Law, the sports writer, will join us. There's been another cancellation. This is a big one for the summer, and we'll talk about that. But I want to get started by bringing in our first guest on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline, a very willing guest, I should say, and a guy that, and I'll introduce him first. He's the executive director of the Montana High School Association, Mark Beckman, joining us here. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well this afternoon. How about you, Jason?
I'm doing pretty good. And full disclosure, and I'm sure you've heard, but I've been very hard on Montana High School Association over the last, 5 or 6 weeks going back to state tournaments. I appreciate you joining us. Cancellation yesterday, Mark, of spring sports. And I know this was not an easy decision to make, but let's go back to the state tournaments. And I know that one wasn't easy as well. But like I said, full transparency, I've been very hard on MHSA. This has been a pretty stressful last month and a half, though, I assume.
Well, it has, but it's been a difficult time, especially for our kids that are participating in these sports and activities, and of course our coaches, our fans, our parents, everyone that's involved. And of course, our number one concern is to make sure that kids and parents, fans, community members are safe, and that's where you have to balance making some of these decisions and count on those people that would help us make those decisions properly and appropriately, such as, the state health department and those people. So it has been a tough time for all those that's been involved.
Do you feel, I don't want to say lucky, but relieved that there were no cases of coronavirus that came out of the state tournament sites?
Well, as we were going through it, we actually, went through everything. We were meeting all day, not all day, but every day, quite a few times a day, and staying in constant contact with the state health department. And we were going with the information we had available at the time. And of course, there were no cases at that time in Montana until that Friday evening. And that's when I made the decision that we were going to, cancel the tournaments, because now once transmission was there, that was one of the tiers that we were looking at, not only from our state health department, but from the CDC and all the other health organizations we were looking at. So we made the decisions with the information we had available there. And of course, more and more information became available after. So, we are very feel fortunate that there wasn't any transmissions, at least tied back to those tournaments at that time.
Mark Beckman joining us, the executive director of the Montana High School Association, on the Jason Walker Show. I go back to the reports that have come out in the last couple of weeks that, there were no transmissions, and very fortunately, like you said. But, you look back and there were cases now, it appears, in Montana that, you go back to March 11th when the tournament started, or even the week before with the Board of Regents meetings. And I know it's now, hindsight is 2020, but if you would have known now or then what you know now, would the state tournaments have kicked off?
Well, if we would have known if there were transmissions, and those transmissions were in that, hit the second tier, second level, I think is what they called it, where it wasn't a case that was like in a nursing home, or I can't remember all the different factors there, but if it was a community case where there could be a chance of community transmission, and we knew that, then I think that in consultation with that state health department, we would have made the decision not to continue.
What about the teams that, and we'll get to spring sports here in a second, but what about the teams that are co-champs and the people saying, well, okay, we could have played the next day because we'd already been exposed, but there was still, I argued the point that there was going to be more people on Championship Saturday than there would have been on Thursday and Friday. But what do you say to those people that say, well, what's one more day?
Well, I say we didn't have any cases until that Friday evening. And out of the 4 sites where we had state tournaments, there were 3 cases in 3 of those sites. So to me, that's like, now there's a chance for transmission. We weren't going to take any more chances, because there definitely would have been huge crowds at those tournaments. No matter where you were at, there's always a big crowd, but we had some extremely large crowds at a few of our tournament sites this particular year.
Mark Beckman joining us, MHSA Executive Director on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline. All right, let's go to spring sports. And I know this is something that you guys were keeping an eye on and working with, the health department and the governor's office and the task force and all that, trying to give student athletes, and especially seniors, which, I argue that it absolutely sucks for these seniors that don't get their senior season of track or softball or whatever the sport is. But did you have a feeling that there was any chance that spring sports were going to happen?
Well, you always look for the best and hope for the best. That if all of a sudden the transmission rates go down, the cases plateau and all that kind of thing, and then they say we're going to go back with a lot looser restrictions, instead of this, a little bit more than 6 feet, or back to the original 250 people kind of thing, then maybe there was a possibility. I don't know if I really felt that was going to happen, but we were sure hoping it was going to happen, and we wanted to wait as long as we possibly could, and our board looked at it and said, we're going to wait until we're going to give it the May 4th and deadline. And if they were not back in school, because there's no doubt if kids have to be in school, because if you're saying we don't feel they're safe to be in school, then are they safe to be participating in athletics or activities? So we looked at that, but also without restrictions. So how do we deal with a track meet, even if it's a dual with 30 kids on each team, transporting them, getting to the site? You have a kid who high jumps and hits the pit. Now, do you have to sanitize the pit each time? How would all of that work? How would they be able to, come together and get there and then be there at the thing? How about in softball, where they're the dugouts more than, how can you do 6 feet? How can you do the transportation there? Everyone will be touching the ball as is in tennis, those kind of things. So with all those restrictions and all those concerns out there, how could there be, a real meaningful spring sports season, along with a lot of schools determining that they weren't going back? Mm-hmm. So if they weren't, then how would that look too?
Well, and I had a guy bring up a point yesterday when we were talking about cancellation of spring sports, and it was a Facebook message, and he said, if you're there was the chance of bringing them back May 4th, for instance, but you still have to have the 5 practices for other sports other than golf. But then what are you playing for? You go right into districts, divisionals, and really state tournaments. I think the risk of injuries was something that, nobody was talking about as well, because a lot of these kids, Mark, haven't been working out as much as they normally would have. Was that a concern?
Oh, well, definitely, and we did have some plans in place that they would come back at 5. Hopefully when they started the season, we had a weekend. They got maybe their 5 practices there, but get 5. And then we would not have had district track meets. We would have had meets. We would have had some regionalized meets where, then go out and start performing and all that. We would have had a divisional in the state. Softball, we would have played regionalized jamborees, where you can play 4 one-hour games in a day. So you could bring people in, and it wouldn't be where they're all on top of each other. You bring in these 2 teams will play way on this field, these 2 teams over here, and then they could play up to 4 games and do regionalized and then go right into divisional and then qualify into state. So we had some plans in place, but with those restrictions, it just would not work. It wouldn't be feasible.
And like I said, I was a very big critic of Montana High School Association, especially when states in our area all started canceling. Washington, Idaho, Oregon, and then Wyoming and South Dakota. And I know South Dakota had a lot more cases of this COVID-19 than Montana, but was that something that you guys were keeping an eye on too? Or was it just, hey, we're Montana, we're going to do our own thing regardless of what our neighboring states does or do?
Well, that never was the thought at all, because we're Montana, but I'm the director of the High School Association. I'm not a state health expert. So we had to rely on, and we appreciate all the cooperation, the communication with our state health department. They were fantastic. And so we were relying on them, and they were we were going through all those steps. Washington finished their state tournaments, but they had transmission. They were talking about other, like in North Dakota, there was transmission, but not in a community at the time. And then it became a community transmission. So all of those things occurred, and we were looking at it like, if we get a diagnosed case and there's a chance of community transmission, we're not going to continue on, even if they're not in the areas or that, because it's just too risky. So we had all kinds of factors in there and really relied on our state health department and really appreciated their willingness to provide us with that information.
What about though, like the spring sports, like other states had been canceling as well? That was really. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's probably about, I think yesterday there was 36 or 38. There might be 40 now today. So as you can see that, as you know, of course, NCAA, NAIA, they all canceled right away, saying we know they were looking way ahead, saying we're pretty sure that this is not going to go away, and there was not a lot of hope. They're going to do this. Well, then as states kept looking at it too, same thing. So I think it's close to 40 states now that have canceled their spring season.
A couple final ones for Mark Beckman, the MHSA Executive Director, and I appreciate you joining me. Like I said, I was a very big critic of MHSA over the last few weeks, but the fall, we don't know what the fall season, I know Montana's slowly opening up, but we don't know when phase 2 starts. We don't know when phase 3 starts. How far into the fall sports season right now are you guys planning? Because you look at NAI, you look at NCAA, they don't even know if they're going to have fall sports yet.
Right. And our staff has been great about looking at what if we have a 2-week delay? What if we have a 3-week delay? What if in football, we make sure that they say, well, these non-conference games won't be played, and we're going to go right into conference games. Or if we have to start late, where we'll take a shortened conference season and then work proceeding into the state playoffs. The same thing with volleyball. So we're looking at all of that now and trying not to have a huge impact onto our next winter sports season for those kids to get started and get into the things they need to get into. But we've been looking at that, and again, we're hopeful that things will be better by the time. We'll never be back to a real normal, but some type of normalcy where we're able to at least play the game.
Well, I appreciate you joining us, Mr. Beckman, and keep up the good work, and don't get too mad if people are critical. And appreciate the time as always, though. I know you guys are doing the right thing, and you tried to do the right thing for the kids, especially the seniors. And like I said, this is just it's a tough 2020 for these seniors, and the freshmen and the sophomore and the juniors, they'll get another chance, but not these seniors, and that does it does hurt, and it is bad, but I know you guys tried to do the best.
Well, I appreciate that, and I understand there's high emotions on both ways, on should we be out there at all, or we need to be out there, and especially from the seniors. I taught, coached, and was an administrator for many years before I came into the association 23 years ago. So I know how those feelings would be and how I would be feeling, but like I say, we try to make the best decisions and use all the best possible resources to make those decisions.
Well, like I said, we appreciate the time, and take care. Have a great summer for sure, and hopefully we're talking about sports in the fall. That
would be great. I hope that's the case.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That is Mark Beckman, the Executive Director of the Montana High School Association, joining us here on the Jason Walker Show. And I wanted to be very open and honest. And you've heard this show. I was very very critical of Montana High School Association. I appreciate him joining us to talk about it, and hopefully, like I said, we get sports to talk about in the fall. Speaking of sports in the fall, planning for 2 schools, including one that's never had sports. What's that like? Mark Ader joins us, especially now in this time of uncertainty, if there is going to be a fall sports season. Mark Ader, the Bozeman Activities Director, will join us next here on The Jason Walker Show.
Who doesn't love being number one? When your team's dominating the standings, or your favorite band rocks the charts at number 1, it feels good, right? Kind of like how it feels when you have auto insurance with State Farm. Because making you feel like number one is an honor your local State Farm agent takes seriously. Through the good times and not so good, your State Farm agent's proud to be here to help life go right.
Call State Farm agent Mike Miller in Helena today. Yes, it's true that Montana is a long way from the Gulf Coast, but you can bring that Cajun flavor home with a stop at Cafe Zydeco. From po' boys to classic sandwiches, Cafe Zydeco has all the best Cajun in town. Are you in the mood for seafood gumbo or crawfish etouffee? Maybe you're craving jambalaya with some shrimp and grits. Head in for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or call ahead for pickup or delivery. Cafe Zydeco will fix all your southern cravings, even on a chilly Montana day. Cafe Zydeco is a proud sponsor of The Jason Walker Show. Have you thought about buying a home and just don't know where to begin? Well, when it comes to one of the most important purchases one can make, we understand it can be frustrating and confusing, but it doesn't have to be. Let the Major Mortgage team help you with all your mortgage needs. Major Mortgage means major service, and we would love the opportunity to help you today. Give J.R. McFadden, NMLS number 1246357, a call today at 406-465-1918, or you can visit him at 2001 11th Avenue, Building A, Suite 3 in Helena. Major Mortgage is a division of AMCAP Mortgage, NMLS number 129122, equal housing lender. Spring is fast approaching and summer is just around the corner, so now is the time to get those windows tinted at Auto Concepts as the sun starts to heat up. Tinting is the best way to keep the sun out of your little one's eyes driving down the road. Plus, it just looks cool. Auto Concepts is your exclusive 3M dealer for tinting as well as the best clear bras in town. Auto Concepts clear bras will not fade or yellow over time. And don't forget about suspension lifts and power steps for your rig too. Visit AutoConceptsHelena.com or check them out on Facebook. Auto Concepts, the auto enhancement professionals.
Store-wide savings are what you'll find when you shop for new home furnishings at Rucker's Furniture. This means tremendous values on Helena's largest in-stock selection of home furnishings. When you shop Rucker's, you'll find store-wide savings on the furniture you want for every room in your home. And you'll also find our selection of Serta iComfort, the most comfortable beds in Helena. 12-month financing is available with approved credit on most purchases over $299. Ask for details. You'll find store-wide savings at Rucker's Furniture, 1010 Dearborn, Helena.
Jason Walker Show inside the Major Mortgage Man Cave, and this segment is brought to you by our friends at Rucker's Furniture. Appreciate everybody over there, 1010 Dearborn in Helena. Make sure, by the way, you get on the schedule for Nitro Green and for all of your lawn, pest, and tree needs so that you can have a very nice-looking summer and yard for the summer. All right. Still talking about our conversation we just got wrapped up with Executive Director of the MHSA, Mark Beckman, and like I said, I'm very critical of MHSA, and one of the guys that agrees that I was very critical, but I wasn't critical of anything Bozeman High did, but who knows yet? Well, the season hasn't even started. We might be moving forward, but just kidding. Mark Ader joins us, the activities director at Bozeman High, Bozeman Schools, because now there's two down there. There will be, but Mr. Ader, how are you?
I am good, and yes, it's got to be two schools now. So we've got the Bozeman Hawks and the Gallatin Raptors.
Hey, I got to tell you, before I get going here, that gym at Gallatin High looks awesome. That Raptors logo really stands out, and it looks good.
No, they did a great job with that floor. You know, we really wanted, the logo looks good, and we kept it simple, as far as the floor designs. We didn't put a lot of color into it, but the company did a great job. I'm so excited to use that next year. It was great being in the gym the other day. It's perfect. I mean, as close to perfect as I think it could be.
Well, we were talking off the air. I'm a Bozeman Hawk guy, so I can't give too much publicity and credit to Gallatin yet until they get going. But yeah, that gym, it looks absolutely amazing. And the football field, it's coming together. You've got the great complex. That's a huge complex out at the new Gallatin school.
It is, and it's been exciting. Actually, the last couple of weeks we spent time out there because we've been ordering equipment. We just got our pole vault pits and our high jump pits in, and so we've been out there, and the track is beautiful. It's ready to go. We might have even been able to have a meet on it this year. Maybe we'll do something this summer. We'll have to see. But it's ready to go. The softball fields look good, right next to it. and then the school looks good. And the one thing about where it's at, there's good views in every direction.
Yeah. Well, it is Bozeman after all, Mark.
Yes, I know, and it's always a beautiful day in the Gallatin Valley.
That's right. It's a little different than Colstrip, which is still beautiful. But Mark Ader joining us here on the Jason Walker Show on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline. All right, the big reason I reached out last week to get you on the show is I'm showing some pictures of that you put up on your Twitter page of Gallatin High School's gym. But the big reason I wanted you on is to talk about getting ready for the sports season for the fall with 2 schools and 2 sports teams instead of just one. How difficult has that been, especially considering, Mark, all the COVID-19 stuff we've been going through?
Well, first, when we did scheduling, the AAADs met in November in Helena. So we sat down to schedule, the 2021 fall sports season. And that was the first time I've told people that within 5 minutes I felt overwhelmed because I was scheduling for 2 schools. I'd always scheduled for one. And I was scheduling for Bozeman and Gallatin, and I was scheduling football, volleyball, cross country, and then soccer. So, all of a sudden my calendar was filling up fast. I had to ask everybody just to slow down for a minute because it was a little overwhelming there. I sat there. I told my wife afterwards, man, I was shell shocked. I was done, and I studied my schedule. I had to go back and make some changes because I made some mistakes. So, getting used to that, and again, we just finished up scheduling the basketball and wrestling for the winter. So, that is new, and I think that'll always be a little bit of a challenge. As far as COVID-19, in some ways, it's been a little bit of a blessing because we haven't been able to have spring sports. So I've spent time making sure our equipment orders are getting done. For Gallatin, I've been able to spend a little more time doing that, and also on the hiring process. We've got our head coaches, and now we're working on getting assistant coaches. So, in some sense, the COVID-19 has helped that out. Now, obviously, we are a little concerned going into the summer because we've got a bunch of kids getting together for the first time, and we would like them to be able to see each other before school starts. So we are worried about that. It's how it goes this summer and getting things started on time next summer. So that will be the challenge for the new school because it will, everything is new.
Mark Ader joining us here on the Jason Walker Show, Bozeman Schools Activities Director. And you have to say activities director because it involves band and speech. It's not just athletics, but you did mention there, without the spring sports, you're able to focus. You've got a lot of coaches switching gears and switching schools and bringing in, all sorts of coaches for all sorts of different sports. And we'll talk a lot about that, I'm sure, in the fall when I get you back on. But Monday, I think Bozeman School Board is going to decide if schools are going to open back up. What's your anticipation on that?
Yeah, I got to be careful because I want to say too much, but I think it's going to be hard for to put kids back in school. I mean, you take a look at, every Bozeman school is about full.
Right.
So, it'd be hard to maintain social distancing. And because of the number of students, it's harder to come up. I would think, being a former principal, I couldn't imagine trying to come up with a schedule, alternating schedule or whatever it may be to accommodate that. So, I'll be surprised if there's many schools that come back, to be quite honest. I think it's just going to be too hard. And, when you're in charge of kids, you got to, take safety up another notch. And so, you're taking care of somebody else's kids. I think we'll be very cautious if in bringing kids back.
And that's one thing too, our little one she'll be 2 next Friday, but do we keep sending her to daycare? We've kept her home since this whole thing started because we have the ability to. But as a parent, it's different than I would think, Mark, as an activities director, because you want these kids, you want the seniors to have a send off. But at the same time, like I said, as a parent, you have different thoughts at times, I think maybe. And how did you approach that?
Well, and as a parent, you're right that it's a little bit tougher. And now I have a teenage son. And so, those types of kids tend to question things a little bit more than
2-year-old?
else. Yes, then the 2-year-old. The 2-year-old's probably happy to be home. Now, the teenager, he struggled being at home with mom and dad all the time. And so, we've had to go around about that a few times, and the whole social distancing thing. And then, I think he's figured out that, the one big benefit of school is we probably all realize is he misses his friends. Mm-hmm. So that's been tough. But yeah, you sit there and think about it, both as a parent and then, right before the break, we had to decide whether or not to go see my mother. My mother is 80 years old, and so one of those types of situations. So, my wife and I have been debating this social distancing and how to visit with everybody every day for the last month, probably just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm. What was your biggest learning experience in this first year? And obviously you got an eye opener in March when everything shut down, but before all of this, you got a state championship in football, which, as a Hawk, like I said, that's always a good thing. But moving from a small school to a bigger school, a lot different.
It is. I think the first big learning curve for me was just when I came to Bozeman, was being part of the facilities here. My second day in, I was at a trailer meeting. We met every 2 weeks with the people, the Jackson construction crew doing the stadium. So I thought that was a big learning experience there. And then dealing, it was the first time I'd worked with soccer.
Right.
So that was quite a big learning curve in the fall. Just getting to know the sport and being around the sport. The number of games, and Bozeman, as you know, has a great tradition in soccer. Mm-hmm. So that was probably the biggest change right there. And with soccer, just those extra sports. And plus this year we scheduled extra games or matches because, we're trying to prep as many kids as possible for the transition. So I spent a lot of time at school in the fall. I think in the first month, most of our volleyball and soccer matches were scheduled at home. So in September, I think I had I had Sundays and maybe a Monday at home, and that was about it. So that was probably the big change. Is just for me it was soccer. Everything else I felt pretty comfortable with, but getting to know and be around the sport of soccer, which I enjoyed tremendously. So it was all good.
Bozeman Schools Activities Director Mark Ader, our guest here, Jason Walker Show. All right, so I got to know this. As a Bozeman Hawk grad, 1993, go Hawks. I don't want what happened to Flathead happen to Bozeman High when Gallatin starts, like, Glacier. That's not going to happen, right? We're not going to have a lot of down years as a Hawk fan, am I?
I hope not. And that's, I think the one thing that I've really tried to do is make sure that, we've talked about Bozeman 1 and keeping, making sure the transition goes as smooth as possible. My goal is to, one is to start new traditions at Gallatin and maintain the old ones at Bozeman High. So excellence. And so I think the coaching staffs we have put together at both schools are very good. So I feel real comfortable with that. Now we'll just have to see what happens with the kids as they come up. I'm sure there'll be cycles, but I think both schools will be set to have success. And the one thing that, it was happening before I got here is our board and the administration was pretty adamant about, enforcing strict border guidelines. There's a line drawn, and if you're on one side, you're going to Gallatin. If you're on the other side, you're going to Bozeman High. So I think we'll have to stick to that, make sure that we stick to that.
I appreciate that as a Bozeman fan, although, it's hard for me not to root for Gallatin because the Raptors cool, the colors are awesome. It's really hard not to switch over.
It is. And then, when you walk into the building over there, it's a beautiful facility. And, you walk in and you walk into that gym, you go, it's going to be nice, So now, luckily, Bozeman is, and if we shut school down, we could be starting earlier, but there'll be construction starting on Bozeman High this summer. Those wings along Main Street are going to be gone. And we'll be putting an auditorium and a student commons area in there. So there'll be some of those benefits coming there. And then I think, in the fall of 21, we'll start on Bozeman High School. So redoing some things there as far as air handling and painting and things like that. So
Very nice.
the school district is really wants to make sure that, we don't have the old school and the new school, that both
Right.
schools are dated and kids will want to attend both.
I got to ask you this. You mentioned getting the scheduling together for the fall. And last year was such a, this was another thing I was very critical of last year with AA, and you weren't there yet, so you didn't have to deal with it. But everybody made the playoffs. How's the fall football this year? Does everybody make the playoffs again?
No, I think, I think the principals got to approve it, the AA principals, but it'll be 6 and 6 will make the playoffs. So 12 teams. So the first week, 3s and 6s will play each other, 4s and 5s, 1 and 2s will have byes. So
Okay.
that's how it's going to work out this year. So 7 and 8s will not make the playoffs.
Okay, I like that. I'm a fan of that. I can get behind that a little bit.
There was a lot of discussion on that
I'm sure.
meetings in November, but with the coaches and the ADs.
Well, and that's the cool thing too, is being a Bozeman Hawk guy is, when I go back to, football championships, and then you look at golf championships, cross country, the dominating that Bozeman High has had. But I felt so bad that, a new school like Belgrade suffered so bad in its first year in the AA. And then you had teams that made the football playoffs that probably saved some jobs, really, for coaches around the state. And I don't want to see anybody lose their jobs, but there's teams that shouldn't have been in the playoffs. And that was just so hard to watch, that first week of playoff games this last fall.
Yeah, and I think the one thing we took a look at was just, does it benefit those kids playing an extra week?
Mm-hmm.
Is it really worth it or not? And so I think that's what the coaches and the administration looked at. Are we doing what's best for kids? So we think this new plan will help us out moving forward with that.
Well, that actually helped lead to get me fired from the radio station last fall. Because I was having a disagreement about the AA playoffs, because I said, people were like, but the seniors get one extra chance to play. But yeah, if you're losing 42-0, is it worth it? And I didn't think it was.
No, and the playoff expansion, and it's happened over the years. I was in, I coached at Colstrip in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And so my first, when we made the playoffs in 97, it was 8 teams. It was a 3-3-2. So, we had to, in the Eastern A, we had to, and actually we started out 1 and 2, and we had to work our way through it and ended up getting in the playoffs. So when you made it back then, it was pretty impressive, and,
Yep.
and then when I was all right with the change in 04, we went from 8 to 12, but that was a discussion 2 or 3 years into the process. So it does, you have to look at the benefits, but when, the problem is when you say everybody makes it, that just doesn't sound good.
Right? I'm glad we agree about something, because I was very critical of MHSA the last 5 weeks, so I'm glad you still came on the show and chatted.
Oh yeah, that's all right. I'm good.
But like I said going in, I wasn't critical of Bozeman, and I have no reason to be yet.
No, that's all right.
No, because
like
activities directors your guys' hands are tied a lot of different times. So I will always support you guys as much as I can.
Yeah. And, and with those MHSA decisions, I will say that, they were trying to consult. I was at the AA, obviously. And so, we were talking every couple hours about what to do. And I hope we've gained enough experience that we never have to go through that again. Because, like I said that day, I'd never been in a tournament where everybody was walking on eggs. It was the Twilight Zone.
Sure.
So, and this spring has been the Twilight Zone. So hopefully we've got this figured out, and we're not ever having to deal with this again.
Well, as a sports talk show host, it's tough to not talk sports, because there's, I've got a sponsor that does a performance of the week. Well, what are we choosing every Monday? Because there hasn't been anything. But as I said, as a parent, it's a lot different than being an administrator. And I'm just glad I didn't have to make any of the decisions. And it's 2 springs in a row that the AA has had some issues. Last year it was softball. This year, it was basketball, and and everything, and then every other classification as well this year. And I just feel bad for the seniors. As much as I can be critical, I still can feel bad for the seniors that don't get that final opportunity this year.
No, and I think that's sometimes the problem is it's all right to feel, both ways. I mean, we want to make sure we're practicing social distancing and we still want to have sports someday. I don't think there's wrong with both points of view. And you brought up the softball thing. Actually, I was a part of that last year too, because our B tournament was with the double A's in Billings, the one and only time. And so I was just getting ready to leave Colstrip, and they called, and told me that they'd canceled everything, and I had no idea it was even going to happen. So, and we had a 5th place softball team that was tied for 4th. So that was real interesting last year for us. So, and I got, I had to, was caught where, you're defending the decision of others, which is sometimes tough to do.
Yep.
So,
yep.
But as far as the seniors go, yes, that is, I feel bad. I think our track coach has already posted a couple of his seniors on Twitter this afternoon, so I retweeted the information there. And I think our other coaches are trying to figure out what to do for their seniors too. So, there's no doubt graduation. How are we going to handle graduation? I talked to a friend of mine today, and they're going to try they're a small school, so they'll try and do it outdoors. But if it doesn't work, they'll just have the kids pull up in a car, get their diploma, and then go be part of a parade. So, like I said earlier, it's like being in the Twilight Zone.
It really does. Mark Ader, our guest here. All right, I got to know this. I need your opinion. Does Montana State football host Long Island on September 5th?
Yes.
Ooh.
September.
Right? But Long Island is out on the East Coast in New York and New Jersey, where it's really bad out there. I'm curious. I really am.
No, I am too. I mean, I would be sure that, that they're already talking, you look at the Big Sky, and like the Cats have Long Island, and then you've also got California schools that have been a little bit more affected. So it'll be interesting. I would assume that, even we'll be doing the same as, hey, can we get by with a 6-game or a 7-game conference schedule next year? So
no, it's going to be very interesting to see.
But yeah, you don't want to lose home games. So hopefully if Long Island has to bail, they bail early. Maybe everybody's got to be ready to adjust on the fly again a little bit. Hey, we've lost to the opponent this week. Is there somebody else you can play, or that kind of thing? I think there still might be some out of the box thinking that's going to have to take place in the next 6 months.
It's almost like when schools, unfortunately high schools in Montana, cancel their seasons, and then you have other schools that are out looking for opponents, especially in football. Maybe this is where a Rocky or a Carroll or a Tech Western type thing get to play the big boys of the Cats and the Grizz for 1 year. Yeah,
it might happen, because I was actually, when was it I can't remember I think those schools, I can't remember if the Cats hosted, I think the Cats hosted Rocky one year a long time ago in the 90s. And I think Western and Tech both have gone down to Idaho. And
yep, Northern Colorado, they've played.
Yeah. So yeah, I bet I would assume, ADs, you're always thinking ahead. If you're, the good ADs are always planning ahead. So I got to believe that, Leon and the rest of those guys are looking ahead to see what they're going to, making plans just in case. Got to have home games. That's the one thing. Yeah. So tough with football's become such a big deal at MSU and UM, which is great. But, we rely on it so much for money that both universities do. So, I'm sure that, it's going to be a challenging fall. I mean, you're right. When you say Long Island coming to MSU on September 5th, will Long Island even have school yet? That's going to be tough.
Well, that's the other thing too, is they're going to be on-campus learning in Montana because Cal State Fullerton canceled its fall in-class learning. They're going online in the fall. And that was decided this week already. So if Cal Poly and, Sac State and these other ones, Davis have to fall in suit too. There's a lot of interesting things that could still happen, and we're still 4 or 5 months away. But
Right.
hopefully,
And, guys, and those guys will have to, with college, you got to still do, you still got to do it, take the health of the kids
Yep.
in mind. So it's going to be tough. You can't not have school and then bring in the football team. I don't see how you can do that.
no,
So
very true.
they'll have tough decisions. Yeah.
Hey, what have you been watching since you haven't had spring sports?
Well, you know what? I was lucky here just a little bit ago. I started recording the Cat Grizz game from 2018. So I can see one of my former players make a big play at the end of the game.
I like that.
Tackle, so that's good.
Yeah,
Let's see. I watched Homeland.
Okay.
I've binge watched Homeland, so I'm caught up to the end of it, wherever it is on Showtime. So I'm right there.
Okay.
Let's see, what else did we start last night? The Ranch, is that what it is? I can't remember. With
I've
Ashton
heard about that. Yeah.
So started that one. Watched a Mark Wahlberg movie on Netflix the other day. So yeah, I read a book and a half. Back to
Ooh.
reading again is good. So yeah, those are the kind of things I'm trying to do to fill in the time.
I like it. I like it a lot. Well, I started Ozark, so that's what I'm on right now. So
That's the Ozarks is the other one I've debated starting. My wife told me it looks pretty intense, so we haven't. We're debating whether to get started yet. But if we don't have school in May, there's a good chance I'll be watching that.
yeah, I'm guessing you won't be at school in May, but that's just my feeling. Bigger schools, it's got to be more tough. You just can't do it.
I don't see how. I don't see how. Yeah, I agree with you. I haven't seen any double A school gets back in. Unless you've got. I just don't see how you can do social distance. So.
There's no way. And one kid on a bus, because all those extra buses that Montana has around in bus drivers, right?
Yeah.
And all those extra teachers you got just floating around waiting to teach
Right.
half, schools classes
There
half the
might
size.
be extra buses, but there are no extra bus drivers. That is the bane of every AD in Montana right now. It's making sure that you've got a bus driver and a bus for your trips. So, yeah, there's no. I don't see how. That's what I told somebody. How are we going to transport our track team and maintain social distance?
Yep. Well, East Helena is looking for bus drivers, and my wife said I should apply, and I'm like, I don't like my own kids, let alone everybody else's. So I don't know if that'd go really well.
No, driving bus takes a special kind of person. And
It does. Yeah, it definitely does. I feel bad for all the bus drivers that I had growing up because we weren't always the nicest kids on buses.
No, that's what you've got to supervise 80 kids and you have your back to them. People don't realize how hard that can be.
Yeah, and that mirror's not easy to look in exactly all the way at every seat either. So, hey,
No.
Mark, I appreciate the time. I look forward to chatting with you in the fall when we have actual sports to talk about and fun things. But love following the updates. You're one of the great follows on Twitter because you're just, Hawks up, Raptors up. It's you're fun to watch. I appreciate all your updates.
All right. Well, thank you. Yes, I love social media is a great way to promote our kids. So
Absolutely. And we'll be doing a lot of promoting in the fall once the sports start back up, and that includes the Raptors and the Hawks. Mark Ader, appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Jason.
That is the Bozeman Activities Director, Mark Ader, joining us on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline. Quick break. We'll come back. There's a new book out about baseball, and Keith Law wrote it, and he'll tell us about it next on the Jason Walker Show.
Store-wide savings are what you'll find when you shop for new home furnishings at Rucker's Furniture. This means tremendous values on Helena's largest in-stock selection of home furnishings. When you shop Rucker's, you'll find store-wide savings on the furniture you want for every room in your home. And you'll also find our selection of Serta iComfort, the most comfortable beds in Helena. 12-month financing is available with approved credit on most purchases over $299. Ask for details. You'll find store-wide savings at Rucker's Furniture, 1010 Dearborn, Helena.
During this time of uncertainty and stay-at-home orders, Dinners Done Right wants to remind you that they're still open. Just go to dinnersdoneright.com, place your order, and then pick it up for dinner that night, or plan ahead and order for the weekend. It's easy. Visit dinnersdoneright.com, register, pick your meals, then pick them up, or stop in and grab meals out of the front freezer. Dinner's Done Right's taking extra precautions with extra cleanings going on with every piece of equipment and personnel. Dinner's Done Right thanks you for your continued support, and may we all stay safe and healthy during this time. Have you thought about buying a home and just don't know where to begin? Well, when it comes to one of the most important purchases one can make, we understand it can be frustrating and confusing, but it doesn't have to be. Let the Major Mortgage team help you with all your mortgage needs. Major Mortgage means major service, and we would love the opportunity to help you today. Give J.R. McFadden, NMLS number 1246357, a call today at 406-465-1918, or you can visit him at 2001 11th Avenue, Building A, Suite 3 in Helena. Major Mortgage is a division of AMCAP Mortgage, NMLS number 129122, equal housing lender.
Yes, it's true that Montana is a long way from the Gulf Coast, but you can bring that Cajun flavor home with a stop at Cafe Zydeco. From po' boys to classic sandwiches, Cafe Zydeco has all the best Cajun in town. Are you in the mood for seafood gumbo or crawfish etouffee? Maybe you're craving jambalaya with some shrimp and grits. Head in for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or call ahead for pickup or delivery. Cafe Zydeco will fix all your southern cravings, even on a chilly Montana day. Cafe Zydeco is a proud sponsor of The Jason Walker Show.
Welcome back. Final segment, Jason Walker Show on a Thursday. Tomorrow, Bob Valvano will join us. That's right. Bobby V, the ESPN radio host, will join us, get his thoughts on the first round of the draft, which is tonight. Also, just talk about sports or lack thereof, but that's coming up tomorrow. Here inside the Major Mortgage Man Cave, we continue on a Thursday. So there's a new book out, and it talks a lot about good decisions and bad decisions made in the game of baseball, both on the field and off the field. And it came out Tuesday rather, and joining us now to talk about it is the writer from The Athletic, senior writer. His name is Keith Law, and he joins us now here on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline on the Jason Walker Show.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm just living the dream. I get to talk about baseball. It's the best sport in the world, so I mean, you can't go wrong with that, right?
I agree.
Hey,
No, that's true. The only thing that could be better would be if we had actual games.
Well, when is that going to happen, Keith?
Probably not until July or so. That's my guess based on what the experts have told me.
The experts, right? Yeah, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. Well, before we talk about your book, is this minor league, Major League Baseball fiasco going to get solved today?
It seems like they've agreed on the number of teams they're going to reduce to and what the realignment will be. There are still some other issues of payment that may need to get worked out, but my guess is we'll see the framework of an agreement. I think the minor leagues basically they lost. They have to give in because so many of these clubs are potentially going to go out of business anyway if they lose all or most of the season.
Very true. Keith Law joining us here. He is the senior baseball writer for The Athletic, and he's written the book Smart Baseball, but also the new book Inside Game, Bad Calls, Strange Moves, and What Baseball Behavior Teaches Us About Ourselves. I'm very intrigued by this book because as a New York Mets fan, I feel like almost every move they make is a bad move. How many Mets moves do you dissect?
I actually don't know that I have a Mets move in there. I actually agree with you. Certainly where the Wilpons are involved, that's really the problem, right? This is not, I don't think there's anything wrong with the Mets, front offices necessarily. I'm not a huge fan of their current GM. I think he's probably not very good. Unsurprising, he had no experience in the front office before they hired him. Mm-hmm. But they've drafted really well. I think they've done a pretty good job developing players when they keep them. The biggest problem is ownership. They are run by the Wilpons, who have run this as too much of a family business, made some very poor financial decisions. Jeff Wilpon, who seems to be too involved in baseball operations, and that's why they ended up with a general manager. They had two candidates at the end, one of whom was highly qualified and now runs the Red Sox. The other was an agent who had no front office experience, and it's really shown. And other front offices have said they like trading with the Mets because they think they've got a chance to come out ahead.
Wow. Keith Law, our guest here. It's crazy, and A-Rod and J-Lo are going to be new owners now, apparently, so who knows?
That's not going to happen. That's my bold prediction. That'll never happen.
Well, I appreciate that right there as like I said, lifetime Mets fan. All right, in your book, what are some of the worst decisions that you dissect?
So I try to run the gamut in the inside game, from stuff on the field that folks are familiar with to a lot of front office decisions. So I talk about the Angels' decision to give Albert Pujols a 10-year contract, and now to continue to play him, to violate the sunk cost fallacy, to say, well, we're paying him, we might as well be playing him. But that's not really true. You're paying him no matter what. If he's not helping your club win, then you should just bench him. A lot of people struggle with that, with deciding not to use something when they've already bought it. That exercise machine you bought at New Year's because you were such an optimist, now your decision to use it should have nothing to do with what you spent on it. It should be, do you want to exercise? But I also go down to the level of decisions on the field. The Grady Little choosing to leave Pedro Martinez in that Game 7 of the playoffs of the ALCS in 2003, which ultimately cost the Red Sox the series and the pennant, the chance to go to the World Series. Or Bob Brenly's series of blunders in the 2001 World Series, but the Diamondbacks won anyway. Does that mean Bob Brenly did a good job because they won? No, of course it doesn't. Outcome and process are not necessarily the same thing. Outcome bias is a bias where you say good outcome must mean good process, but that's not actually how it works. You can have a bad process, still have a good outcome, and of course we all know you can have a good process where you make a lot of right decisions. It still doesn't work out because that's life. That doesn't mean your process was bad. It might mean you should think about it again, but it doesn't mean that your decisions were wrong. It just means it didn't work out.
You have front office experience with the Toronto Blue Jays. How were you able to take that experience into breaking down some of the good or bad decisions from GMs and front office staff from the last, 30 years?
It's really more that it helps me because I understand the jobs. I know what people do in front offices. I have been around those jobs. I've been in those conversations. So when I wanted to reach out to people in front offices to talk about certain decisions, or just talk about ideas in this book, I can speak their language. It's always been helpful that I was there at one point. And there's a part of me that wishes I'd done more jobs in a front office. Not that I wanted to make that my career and wouldn't choose to do so now, but it's always good to have more experiences, more education of a sort, even if you're going to change, pivot to something else. I think I say this a lot. If you're going to cover an industry, you really need to understand what the people in your industry understand. And to the extent that people in front offices know about this stuff, the book I refer to constantly in the Inside Game is another book called Thinking Fast and Slow that was recommended to me by somebody who's now the assistant GM of the Baltimore Orioles. I know that Theo Epstein and Billy Beane have read that book and recommended it to people who work for them. So knowing this stuff is also helpful to me when evaluating the moves and the decisions that people in front offices make as well, because again, if you want to cover them, if you want to have an opinion on what an industry you cover is doing, you have to know how they think so that you can dissect it and then come to your own conclusion. I can disagree with the decision that Mariners make a trade. I can say I don't like it, but I have to know what their thought process was so that I can come to my own conclusion.
Keith Law joining us, senior baseball writer for The Atlantic. He's got a new book out. It's called The Inside Game, Bad Calls, Strange Moves, and What Baseball Behavior Teaches Us About Ourselves. It's just intriguing to me because you look at some of the, great trades, or, you mentioned in Bull Durham, they mentioned, the Milt Pappas trades, some bad trades along the way. But also you talk about some of baseball's longest running debates, like pitch counts. And are they good? Are they bad? What's your thoughts?
So I bring up pitch counts in the context of something called moral hazard, which is where, I'll explain it by way of the pitch count debate for college and high school players. If you're a college coach and you have a pretty good pitching prospect, you're only going to have him probably for 3 years. After his junior year, he'll get drafted and go off to professional baseball. So you're not concerned about his long-term health. We know that limiting pitch counts, that limiting a pitcher's workload, particularly while he's young, can help keep him healthy for the long term. It reduces the chances of catastrophic injury. It doesn't eliminate the chances, but it reduces them. A college coach doesn't care as much because if I wear this pitcher down so it gets hurt a couple of years down the road or just isn't as effective, not my problem. I only have him for 3 years. So college coaches don't have that same incentive to protect pitchers' long-term health that professional teams do. Professional teams, you'll never see a minor league pitcher go much over 100 pitches. 120 pitches is totally unthinkable in professional baseball, minor league baseball.
Mm-hmm.
You see it in college all the time because they don't care. They don't have to care. It does not matter to them if that pitcher ends up overworked and gets hurt or becomes less effective at some point down the road. They know they've got a 3-year time horizon. That's called moral hazard. The college coach is doing what's probably best for him personally, maybe what's best for the school, but definitely not what's best for the long-term health of the player, because their time horizons are so completely different. And that can come up in professional baseball too, where a GM who thinks he's about to get fired maybe, he might make a trade that he thinks could save his job, but is ultimately, in the long run, bad for the franchise as a whole.
Well, you look at Johan Santana, 134 pitches in his no-hitter for the Mets, and basically he was done after that. Was that a good decision to leave him, or a bad decision to leave him out there? You know, it's one of those questions. I know we're running short on time, Keith. You also talk about Pete Rose, and should he be in the Hall of Fame?
I really go back and forth on this one. You know, I talk about Pete Rose's, the arguments for Pete Rose, that essentially the arguments that he didn't really do anything wrong. I don't agree with that. I think what he did was absolutely wrong, and by betting on certain games and not others, he signaled to gamblers when he might be trying harder as a player manager, and when he might be taking it easy in certain nights, saving his better pitchers for a different night instead. Should Pete Rose actually be in the Hall of Fame? It's hard to have a Hall of Fame without the guy who had the most hits in baseball history. Right now, the guy with the most hits in history and the guy with the most home runs in history, neither of them actually has a plaque in the Hall of Fame. That's kind of a problem, right? This is a museum that is supposed to commemorate the history of baseball and its leading players. And both guys were were flawed humans, Rose more so than Barry Bonds, certainly. But they belong in there. They were among the all-time greats. You cannot tell the story of baseball without those guys. So I actually may not vote for Rose personally because I have such a hard time with what he did. But I also would not object to seeing him have a plaque in there as long as it spells out exactly what the issue is, what we know he did, he confessed that he did, and why that was such a problem.
Well, Keith, we appreciate the time. The book is called The Inside Game. You can get it in stores now. Enjoy the off season until there is a season.
My pleasure. You too. Stay safe.
That was Keith Law joining us on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline, and interesting. It was. I'm looking forward to reading that book, The Inside Game. It's available now. Great show today. Great show. And let's get to On This Day in History. It is brought to you by the Motherlode Sports Bar, Casino, and Restaurant. It is April the 23rd, National Cherry Cheesecake Day, Picnic Day, Take a Chance Day, Talk Like Shakespeare Day. It is also National Lost Dog Awareness Day. Now, how does a lost dog know if it's aware if it's lost? It is also Take Our Daughters and Sons to Work Day. 1939, Ted Williams hit his very first home run. 1954, Hank Aaron hit his very first home run. 1962, the Mets won their first game ever. They started 0-9, and then they were 1-9. In 1989, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar played his last game as a Laker. 1989 as well, the NFL Draft, UCLA quarterback Troy Aikman, the first pick by the Dallas Cowboys. And on this date in 1953, the movie Shane with Alan Ladd was released. Great movie. Let's see. Also had a very young Jack Palance in it as well. Happy birthday today, Daniela Hantakova, the Slovakian tennis player, born in Czechoslovakia, 1983. Chloe Kim, the American snowboarder, won Olympic gold a couple of years ago, born on this date in 2000. A couple of other birthdays. Shirley Temple was born on this date in 1928. Roy Orbison's birthday was today, 1936. Also, William Shakespeare, born and died on this date, 1564, and he died in 1616. And Howard Cosell passed away on this date in 1995. That is On This Day in History, brought to you by our good friends at the Motherlode. Now we do this.
We're almost at the end of the show. What did we learn? And what did he miss? Time for the walk-off.
Great show today. Mark Beckman, we appreciate him joining us. And from Montana High School Association, the executive director. I was very critical, and still am, of MHSA, but appreciate him joining us. Mark Ader from Bozeman Schools joining us as well, giving us an update on everything. And then also Keith Law joining us. Appreciate that. Don't forget, you still have time. Get your email in, jasonwalkersports@gmail.com. Who will be the very first FCS or Big Sky player drafted? Who will be the first Big Sky player drafted? You can email only jasonwalkersports@gmail.com. Coming up tomorrow, Friday, we wrap up the week. We've got more trivia, by the way, coming up as well. But Bob Valvano will join us tomorrow. Yep, Bobby V, Jimmy V's brother. Next week, some of the guests, Nick McCarville, Lindsay Berra, Yogi's granddaughter, will join us. Brittany Jackson, B-Jack from the University of Tennessee women's basketball. And Scott Morton will join us next week as well. But Bobby V tomorrow. Hope you see us then. We'll see you here at 4, The Jason Walker Show. See ya.
The Jason Walker Show is produced by the Jason Walker Media Company. Any reuse, rebroadcast, or retransmission without the express written consent of the Jason Walker Show is strictly prohibited. Just listen, watch, and enjoy.